Good morning, everyone. I'd like to call the special meeting of the Salto School District Board of Trustees to order. A recording and or broadcast of this meeting is being made at the direction of the board, which may capture images and sounds of those attending the meeting. If technical difficulties occur or persist, the meeting will continue without broadcasting. I'll now take roll call. Brandon Stroy.
Present.
Jim Malone.
Here.
Stella here. Sorry. Ryan Johnson.
Present.
Blank on your last name. And I, Shelley Sirkiv, here as well. Please rise for the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Thank you, everyone. All right. Would any board members like to provide comment on today's agenda? Being none, may I have a motion to approve the agenda as presented?
So moved.
Thank you, Stella. May I have a second?
1 second.
Thank you, Jim. Motion to approve today's agenda as presented was made by Stella, seconded by Jim. All in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Any abstentions? Thank you. Motion passes unanimously. All right, so we have a study session this morning, and I'll turn it over to Mr.
The
Lawler.
Eric Show today, and I think we want to welcome Brandon to his first
Yes, we
meeting.
do.
Yes, thank you, Trustee Stroy.
Welcome.
You. Welcome to Brandon. We have a member of our Citizens Oversight Committee here today. We also have Director of Facilities and Maintenance, Henry Avianas, and Austin Spade is our Coordinator of Facilities here is also.
Welcome.
So good morning. We're here today to do kind of an update and a study session to talk about Magna EE. On Tuesday, we had a successful bond sale of $95 million. We'll bring that back to the board and give you a highlight to that in the April meeting. But it was a successful sale despite kind of a volatile market. We did okay on Tuesday, so we'll give a highlight of that in the April meeting. Today, we're here to kind of talk about Measure EE. And I want to kind of go through a little bit of the history of how Measure EE came about, and then talk some different scenarios that we've had a previous study session on. And then it's really to answer a lot of your questions. And then at the end of the meeting, it's really no action that will be taken today, but this is really to give staff some direction. And then we plan on coming back to you again in April or May to ask for some sort of finalizing the list and project list. And then we'll be doing our final revisions to Measure N to spend the remaining Measure N dollars, and then also to how we're going to go about budgeting for Measure E. So that's kind of what today is. I'll give a quick highlight of kind of what we're going to talk about today.
Looks like is it locked in my computer? Okay, we're gonna restart. Hold please.
So here's today's agenda for this morning. We're going to talk about kind of the history of Measure E and how it started. Summary of what the Oversight Committee's role is. We have incorporated the San Antonio campus as part of the overall bond program. We want to highlight middle school model and kind of update of some direction we'll be in the future on that. Then we want to talk about site-specific projects of what modernization entails and what that looks like on each campus. Some of the master planning concepts of new construction and what that might entail. Then we want to talk about our funding sources of what revenue is available. If there are other funds in our bond program, they're not just Measure EE. Some of the market impacts, I think, with some of the geopolitical things, and we see the price of gasoline and fuel going up, that it is going to have an impact on some of the cost escalation. So what contingencies are for, and we have a couple slides just on what contingencies are used for, and then kind of what our initial budget will be, and then the next steps in direction that will be coming. So this is a kind of a high level overview, and I try to incorporate some graphics and pictures, and that's the fun of block school, which is really, it has been modernized, but it does need work, right? So all of our schools are going to need some sort of modernization, and we'll kind of highlight some of the needs. So Measure EE was passed in 2024, but before that, we actually approved the facility master plan. It was approved by the Board of Trustees in September of 24. And then we passed Measure EE in November. It's a $350 million general obligation bond, Prop 39 bond. So there's specific requirements on bonding capacity and the assessed value can charge no more to service that debt, no more than $30 per 100,000 of AV. I just did a quick snapshot, so when the community wants to look at this, it's hyperlinked, so they can see a link to the facility master plan. And then we have a little snapshot of Santa Rita of some of the work that was done during master planning. We had a lot of stakeholder input. We had teachers, classified staff, we had parents, principals. So we had a lot of input, custodians, a lot of people were inputting their opinions of what is needed on each campus. Every campus is so different in our community. Each one has different facility needs, different aging infrastructure. So those are all things that we took into account. The Bond Oversight Committee is a requirement for Prop 39 bond. At our last 2 meetings ago, we actually certified the election in February, and that establishes a Citizens Oversight Committee. They will be finishing up overseeing the remaining Measure N dollars, and they will now also oversee Measure EE. We met with the Bond Oversight Committee 2 weeks ago. And so we meet quarterly, we review expenditures, the audit report for the last fiscal year, it's being finished now, and that should be out. The Oversight Committee would bring that to the board in the first meeting in June. We have a link on the Oversight Committee, so if anybody in the public is not here today, they can access this link to see all the previous minutes and reports that are shared with the Oversight Committee and previous audit reports as well. It's a very transparent process. And it's a requirement for Prop 39 general obligation bonds. San Antonio campus background. We purchased the site in 2019. There were significant delays. The whole world kind of shut down during COVID, and it's hard to believe that's 6 years ago. We did an RFQ process for design build in May of 2024. And then at the same time, we're finishing the CEQA process, and that's called the California Environmental Quarterly Act. And that's required. There's a final environmental impact report that is also posted on our website that was certified by the board in June of 2024. The board subsequently in the following year in June of 25, we approved conceptual designs for a design build. And then increment 1 was submitted to DSA, the Division of State Architect. And I'll try to say all the little acronyms out, but the Division of State Architect is the agency that oversees all public school construction. And DSA received those increment 1, which is utilities and demolition. That's going to start this probably May or June of this year. It was submitted to DSA in December. And then the site will start construction this spring, late spring, May, June, and the expected completion date is the fall of 2028. So that's the timing of just the San Antonio campus project. The San Antonio campus budget, we try to list all the costs that we have encumbered in here, just so people can see what are hard costs and what are soft costs. The hard cost is the actual construction, building, constructing, putting in utilities, the buildings, the grounds and facilities. But then there are the soft costs. There are legal services, consulting costs, inspector of records. When you have a home and you're building a home, the inspector will come out. Oh, I'm going to see when it's roughed in plumbing or roughed in framing, and they come out periodically. The Division of State Architect requires inspector on site full time, 8 hours a day, all day. And that's very expensive. And that's why school construction costs so much. Everything is looked at, every bolt, torque testing, concrete, welding, everything that's either in plant or in the field welding. If they're welding out in the field, that is inspected. And so that's why schools are very safe, but that does drive up costs. Schools and hospitals are the most expensive things to build in the Bay Area in California. There has materials consultants, there's security, there is fees, just the fees for the Division of State Architect. We've already encumbered $570,000 just for the permit. So that's like your building permit for the district, right? And so this is our all-in budget. We also have contingency in there, furnitures and fixtures, equipment and other costs that we're budgeting for. And this is our budget. And then as more information becomes available, more contracts have been accrued and encumbered, we'll adjust accordingly. And then any changes in the budget, we will bring back to the board for approval. So this has not been finalized. This is our draft budget. And once the budget is finalized, we'll bring it for approval. We'll probably bring that to you, probably either first or second meeting in June. Yes, Bill?
Well, I just wanted to clarify something for any members of the public that may be watching this later, that the site purchase is included in this budget, and that the purchase was made with Measure N dollars. And so the total that you see at the bottom is not all going to be Measure E funds.
That's correct, yes. So, you know, as we get through the budget and finalize it, we'll have exactly how many Measure E dollars to be allocated toward the project. But we will be spending Measure N dollars in any other funds remaining available. And I'll highlight on another slide to show you what some of that revenue is to fund the project. And then we also put some notes on the side so you can see what that is. Part of CEQA, we've never had to hire a paleontologist. We have to hire a paleontologist. So if they find some bones on the site, the paleontologist will have a training staff with the construction folks. If you find bones, this is how you're supposed to treat them and not disturb them, right? We also have to hire a biologist if there are any raptors or endangered birds nesting in some of the remaining trees. We have to make sure the birds are properly handled with care. So these are two things that are required part of CEQA that people don't realize. The CEQA document is several hundred pages, and as we go through those, like, oh, we better get a biologist on retainer. And so this will be, a lot of these things have to happen right before you start demolition, because if you go out there and walk the site and there's no endangered birds, you know, we have to be careful. So these are like little things that people don't think about as you do new construction, but it's pretty normal to have to do these type of things. The middle school model, we talked to the board and had a nice discussion about the middle school model and some of the concepts and also some of the constraints about how Block is not really the best campus due to some of the just much smaller geographically. And we had that discussion on February 9th. And then we also talked about some final direction. Staff was given direction to move to some model of using Egan as the remaining placement for the remaining Bullis Charter School students. And then we're going to ask the board to give us some direction and what model will work best probably by the end of June. And that will allow us some time to start planning. We are going to do this work soon because the idea would be as we open up the San Antonio campus in the fall of 28, the middle school model will also come at the same time frame. So some of the advanced planning, reconfiguration of Egan and what configuration is used for those portables has to be done. And it's really starting this summer, we're about 2 years away. So there'll be about a year of planning and then another year of bidding and getting things organized. And so we hope to have a pretty seamless transition of opening the San Antonio campus and middle school both happening in the fall of 28. That's the timing of that. We do have a contract with ADIS Architects who's helped us with some of the initial studies, but we do want to have a contract with them at some time before summer goes so they can start their initial planning this summer. It doesn't need to be, they're not going to get a lot of work done during the summer, but we want to get them under contract. So once people come back in the fall, we can work with the Egan staff to work about the programming and how their campus will be laid out. So that'll be happening. So we'll be asking you to have a contract with an architect for design services. We'd like to get that in place by the summertime. Some site-specific modernization scope details. And when we look at the budget, and we'll get into that in much more detail, but really what is modernization at a campus? Modernization is basically going through the whole building and upgrading and modernizing things that are outdated, antiquated, and really past their useful life. The number one thing at our campuses are fire alarms are 25 years old. Many of them are failing. We get a lot of false alarms and things at our campuses, which is disruptive to the educational mission of the district. We want to get our fire alarms upgraded. Once we start upgrading the sites, you know, I don't know if this one has, yes, over by the back wall is a pull station. Well, the pull stations are great in some of the portable buildings, but pull stations are not automatic. So you want heat detectors, smoke detectors, that's modern fire codes to our buildings need to be upgraded. That will be in part, as we modernize the buildings, the DSA will make us upgrade our fire. HVAC, the heating and ventilation systems are past useful life. As our buildings are getting older and Henry's is new, but Austin knows we are replacing more compressors, motors, things that are failing. And instead of repairing them, we have to sometimes replace them because the cost of repairing an old unit that's 20+ years old, it's more cost effective to replace it. But it's not great to just keep piecemealing things. There is also, California has very strict environmental rules and the refrigerants have changed. So there used to be a refrigerant called R22 and R22 is banned. So now you have to, when you start replacing HVAC units, you have to replace them with a more, environmentally friendly refrigerant called 410. I never thought I'd be a refrigerant expert. But that's a perfect example of as things over time, things have aged. In this room here, lighting is a huge concern. Compact fluorescents and fluorescent tubes are banned in California, so we have to replace with LED. And so it's very hard to source and find old bulbs. You can't buy them in California anymore. So as we go through campuses, LED is the standard, and so we'll be replacing all of our classroom lighting. This room, all the rooms in our district need to be replaced. We have done some lighting replacements at Springer, Almond, and Block, but only a handful of our probably worst classrooms. So those 3 campuses had a couple classrooms done, but not the entire campus. Path of travel is something that the Division of State Architect is very vigilant on. And once you touch a building, DSA will require you to upgrade the path of travel. We know we had to do that at Gardner Bullis when we did a shade structure project. They make you go from the parking lot to make sure the parking lot is American Disabilities Act compliant. And then that parking lot, that path of travel from the parking lot to whatever building you're touching. So we'll have to be very strategic as we're doing our construction. If we modernize all the classrooms here at Covington, the path of travel has to be almost relatively flat from the parking lot all the way to the buildings, and path of travel is no more than 2% cross slope. 2% is like almost flat. So that is a challenge because there are different elevations of slopes on our campuses, and that could require extensive reworking of ramps and grades and things. And that's very expensive and very disruptive. So in our budget, we have some money in there for path of travel, but it's kind of an unknown because until DSA reviews the drawings, and we call this the red pen effect. They get their red pen and they draw all over the drawing when you submit them. And then all of a sudden you had a project that was maybe 10 million and now it's 12 million because you might have to do $2 million more of path of travel upgrades. And that's required. It's all for a good thing, but it's very hard to know exactly what they're going to look at from that path of travel upgrades, Brian.
Is that a requirement that's unique to schools? Is that required? I feel like this is more rigorous than you see out in the.
It's the building code, so almost everyone has to comply with it. And you'll see a lot of shopping centers redoing path of travel. You see cities doing it at crosswalks and the little yellow dots, those are called truncated domes. When you put your groceries across the thing and your shopping cart rattles and the eggs break, that's called path of travel, and that's truncated domes. That's also part of the path of travel.
So this isn't unique to DSA, it's an ADA.
Yeah, it's the building code. And so in California has very strict building codes, which is good, but they cost a lot to do those upgrades, right? Especially for safety for schools. You can't get around it. So the path of travel is somewhat of an unknown. And then also part of ADR restrooms. The restrooms have to have clearances around stalls. They call them water closets, right? Which are the partitioned off areas where students could close off around the sinks, around the doors and clearances. So as you start modernizing your campuses, you're dealing with the path of travel, but then once you start touching the restrooms have to be ADA compliant as well. And our best restrooms haven't been modernized in 25 years. So as you're doing this modernization for each building, you have to be capturing those things, upgrading your fire alarms have to be up to code. Path of travel and ADA, those are the types of big things that will be requirements. And then the lighting is called Title 24, that's the energy code. And so all the lighting of not having fluorescence and having LED, that's the energy code called Title 24. And there's more daylighting requirements. There has to be a lot of occupancy sensors. As you walk into the building, the lights come on, and then if the building, there's no movement, the lights go off, right? And those Title 24 things are very expensive. And as we know, anything electrical related costs a lot of money because of the wiring and copper. So those are things that we were being mindful of when we do all these upgrades. Some of our campuses during the master planning, we learned about the school, the front of the school. Sometimes people don't know where to go. So some of the wayfinding is when you come up to the campus, you want to be able to know where to go. So we have to work on some of the, not very expensive, but important. So people show all visitors must check in at the main office. There's a sign pointing to that. That's pretty critical at our schools. And then just really the general classroom things that has to be done. The classroom being paint, they need new technology and TVs or projectors, mostly TVs is our district standards. Looking at the carpet, paint, floors, those are the type of things that need to be refreshed, much needed. The classroom AV, which I just mentioned, emergency communication, a lot of our bells and PAs are failing. We have replaced Santa Rita's bell PA system in Oaks. Gardner Bullis is pretty much on its last legs. That's failing, so we're gonna be fixing that because it's also not keeping good time. And the bell PAs, that's an emergency thing. If we need to make a campus-wide announcement, need your bell PA system to be modernized and upgraded. So we're slowly doing those as needed. We'd like to do them as we modernize the buildings, but some of our fire alarms and bells and PAs won't make it that long. So that's why we don't like doing piecemeal work, but at times it has to be done. And then our alarm and security systems. We have a very antiquated alarm system in some of our classrooms and buildings and things, so we want to upgrade those. It's old technology. And some of the security cameras we have as well are aging. We're going to install 4 new cameras at Allman that are in the back part of the campus. As we remove portables, some of those cameras went away. The cameras are a bit antiquated, so we're going to add some new cameras at not at big expense. But when we're thinking about our entire master plan and all the things that our campuses need, security and alarms and things, those are important. One of the items that I wanted to point out as we were doing this master planning process, glazing or windows, we have a lot of windows that are like the older, steel frames, really not double pane with the thick windows and insulated, but it's very, very expensive. So as we were doing our master planning process, to balance the budget, we took some of the glazing out. Now, when you do a new building, obviously it's gonna be brand new, but modernizing, if we decided to gut an entire campus wing and redo everything, the roof and glazing, the glazing is very expensive, so we took that out of the master plan. We could add it back in, but then other things would have to come off, right? So it's a balancing thing. Glazing is important for energy savings, but there's only so much we can do, so we have to be mindful of what is the biggest impact.
Eric,
Yes.
I am kind of jumping ahead here,
That's
but in your budget spreadsheets, I didn't see a line item for the alarms and security. So is that bundled in with something else or?
It's not. And so that's where we have to decide if we're gonna allocate. It could either come out of contingency or we could allocate some money. The AV technology is mostly rated just to TVs and upgrading the technical, so we'd have to decide if there's gonna be a line item for that or not.
Okay.
I did put $1 million in an item called temporary housing, and that's for portables. If we need them if we can't get a classroom done, which is not our preferred method, it could come out of that budget item. So if we felt like we could, the only school that, and when we talk about as we get, and I'll get to that, I think, I'll get to that. I do have a comment about that as well. So this is kind of what classroom modernization it looks. Next week, there's some people presenting at the California Association of School Business Officials. There's an annual conference next week. And a lot of school districts are doing kind of what we've been doing. And I have a lot of experience doing modernization during the summer to avoid temporary housing. But then it has to be well organized ahead of time, bid out very early. All the equipment has to be procured early. And then once school ends in June, the next day the movers are there, they move everything out and they start demolition. And you can get, our schools are not very large, so you can get, 14, 16 classrooms modernized in the summer. but you have to plan ahead and be very organized. So that's something we can talk about. And then it's kind of nice when people leave for the summer and they come back and they go, oh my gosh, we have a new school, right? And it's a big change. And then where our students and teachers are at is in their classrooms. So it's nice to really, when they come back, they see that. Some site work considerations. And the site work means new construction. So as part of our master plan, there's been discussion about reconfiguring the campuses, removing portables, putting in new buildings. And that is an option, but there are some considerations that I want to make sure that everybody's clear on. One of the things is we do have a lot of aging portables. Some of them we own, some of them we lease. Every campus has a different configuration of portables. Covington and Springer probably have the least, and that's because over the last couple summers, we've been removing those as they haven't been needed. But when the master plan talks about reconfiguring the campus, moving things around, removing the portables and then putting in to new buildings, and there's a cost of that, but there's some considerations. One of them is, as we look at some of the master planning of some of the school sites at their master plans, they said, hey, we would love to have a new multi-purpose room, or our library is currently in a portable, our administrative building is in a portable. And that is true. The idea would be, what is our biggest priority for this bond measure? Do we want to spend the bond dollars, which are limited, on classrooms where teachers and staff spend the majority of their time, or in some of these other ancillary buildings where kids kind of come in there, but then they kind of leave? And not that one is more important. They're all very important educational facilities. Our whole campus is used, but what's the biggest impact? And that's really kind of a decision we have to decide. What's the biggest impact? All the facilities, the libraries, the offices, the MPRs are all important for students. The STEM labs, everything's important, but then we have to prioritize what is the number one priority during this first go of modernization. Gardner Bullis does have a majority of their general education classrooms in portables, which one of the priorities on here we could talk about later is about that. We put $1 million in a thing called swing space, because if we decided that we need to pull those portables out and put in permanent classrooms, we can do that, but we probably can't get that done in one summer. So we would have to do some sort of using the blacktop, putting in temporary portables. They live in those spaces for hopefully a short time. And then if we do some sort of prefabricated timber quest, folio buildings, we get those installed in a much quicker fashion. But I think at Gardner Bullis, we would not be able to avoid having, because it's new construction. New construction takes much longer than modernization. So there's a timing component of it. So we did put $1 million in there. And then as we get further in the bidding process, maybe that money could come out of the Gardner Bullis portables of that phase 6. We could put the money in there, or so that's that's really a balancing act of you're moving money around to cover costs in different projects. And there are budget constraints. As we have discussed it several times, the master plan is a living document. It changes and it identifies all the needs and wants, but then also we're limited. We only have so many bond dollars to go around. This is our first investment in our facilities in a long time. This is a great thing. And so we're going to make as many improvements as we can over the course of the next several years. And then we will, look at a future funding model to help fund some more projects as well. Because whatever we don't get done during this master plan and this bond measure, many districts do multiple bonds over the years. That's a way to do that continual investment into our facilities. Shelley.
I think we need to really emphasize bullet point number 2. I do have parents who come to me and say, we need a library, we need a multi-purpose room. And when they see that they're not getting that right away, it's an excellent reason for why, because we want to prioritize where kids are going to spend most of their time. But I think that that's something that maybe in our communications, we need to really emphasize.
Yeah, it's a challenge. I mean, we would love to have new buildings everywhere, but we're limited on our resources. So we have to decide what's the number one priority. If I'm a teacher or a student, I'm in that classroom, third grade classroom, At Springer, I probably want my classroom done before the NPR, because I do go to the NPR for assemblies and things once in a while. But it's really, we need to decide what's our biggest priority for the kids.
Yeah.
Program administration details. So, at our last board meeting on Monday, the 16th, we went over our general fund. And our general fund is about $91 million. We have an accounting staff, we have a fiscal director, we have a chief business officer, we have an accounts payable person, we have a purchasing person that are helping us with contracts. So whenever you have a bond, we need staff to help manage the bond. We cannot do it alone. This is 3 times the size of our general fund budgets. You can imagine staff is needed. I've done several bond programs before. We always have a combination of using in-house staff for certain things and then outside staff for certain things. So when we're managing projects, you can decide, do you want to hire a project manager to manage the whole thing? Do you want to hire in-house accounting staff? And my experience is having your own in-house accounting staff that follows your board policies on procurement, helps with contract management, program management, the accounting. That's always best practice. So we'll get into this a little bit more, but manage a bond is a big undertaking. It's basically another job. And so there are legal fees associated with that, and that's really reviewing contracts, make sure we're properly procuring things in a proper way. There's program and construction management. So managing the overall program, but then also managing individual projects. There's management information systems and pre-qualification software. There's a lot of ed code requirements, contract labor code requirements, and we have to do a lot of pre-qualification right now for the San Antonio campus. We have to pre-qualify all the mechanical, electrical, and plumbing contractors at over $1 million. So if we don't do that, we can maybe not be eligible for state funding. So there's a lot of requirements, and there's workforce training requirements, labor requirements. So it has to be done, and you have to have the right software and accounting to take care of that. There's program advising, people who are helping to oversee the program. There's a state funding consultant that we've been working with for many years, and that we're working on bringing a resolution to you at the next meeting. The resolution will basically say that the district is going to be applying for state funding for new construction and modernization. There's additional specialty consultants like the Raptor and paleontologist, right? It's a perfect example, but you have to have consultants that are experts in certain things, right? And it could be environmental hazards, it could be electrical consultants. We have a consultant called commissioning. When you do new construction, the building has to be commissioned to make sure the contractor installed it properly. There's inspectors, oversight. So there's a lot of things that are entailed in managing a bond program. There's also the auditor. There's a lot of state reporting, reproduction plans, things like that. And then district support staff. Our staff right now is taking on a lot of the brunt of Measure N right now, doing some of the extra accounting. But we are going to need some staff. We don't need them right this second, but as we move through, as we get closer to the end of the year, we're going to be asking to add some addition. And no administrative salaries or teacher salaries come for the bond program. It's only salaries for staff or consultants that are managing the bond program. So I want to make that very clear also. Can't use it for teacher salaries or administrative salaries. Now, this is where the fun comes in when we start looking at the master schedule. And then we use the word conceptual because this conceptually, we want you to see this as this isn't the exact schedule. And we did this kind of at once on the first study session, but we want to highlight how the bond program will kind of work. Right now, the first thing that's going on, the San Antonio campus is in DSA. DSA is reviewing increment 2. Increment 2 are the buildings that just got submitted 2 weeks ago. They'll be reviewing those, and hopefully that will come out of DSA for comments by summertime. And then we'll address those comments, go back what's called back check. And you go back and we have them check the drawing after their comments, and then you make the correction that DSA requires. Once it's in DSA, then you're bidding and building. And so it's design, bidding, building. So right now, the first project on the schedule is the San Antonio campus. The next project we're gonna have the board approve in June at some time will be the middle school model. We'll get the architect on board, so then that will be in design and planning. And then we'll be bidding that one out, and then once that gets done, then we'll be asking the board by the end of June to say, first phase two is which schools do we want to do modernization or new construction at? We'll get that contract under, and so the idea of the master schedule is you always have something in design, something be in DSA review, and something under construction. And the natural rhythm is every year we're in that normal rhythm. We've got something in design. What's the next thing in design? What are we doing this summer? What are we doing next summer? What are we doing next summer? If we do classroom modernization, the goal is to do all those during the summer. So there will be a natural rhythm of getting those into design well ahead of time, getting them bid out. If we're gonna do something in the summer of 29 at one of our elementary schools, it has to be approved by DSA about a year ahead of time. Because then we want to do pre-construction and bidding and procurement after DSA has approved the drawings. Then we get the contractor on board. They order the materials 6 months ahead of time because HVAC, lights, bells, things take a long time to get. And you order it ahead of time, and there's a lot of advanced planning. So the more advanced planning we do, the more successful the project is. We do not want to start a classroom modernization project and then the contractor says, oh, the light fixtures aren't coming in. Well, wait, we start school the second week of August. That can't happen, right? So the more advanced work we do, the more planning you'll have a successful project. But this is a perfect example of what it would kind of look like. And it will change as we go. And this is kind of like a framework, just like the master plan is a living document. This is the conceptual master schedule. And we use this from another one. I think I even have like phase 5 or whatever's on it. This is not the schedule. This is just a concept of what it looks like. And you can see the different colors. One's in design, one's in construction and bidding. So. And then the conceptual cash flow, just like our general fund, we need to have cash. So we do have cash in the bank now as our bond program. We're going to be using that cash first. We just sold Series A on Tuesday for $95 million. We will not get that money deposited probably about the second week of April. That will hit our bond fund called Fund 212. And then once we spend down the remaining Measure N dollars and other proceeds, then we will start using the Measure EE first series. And then as we start running low in cash, then we'll sell the second series. That'll be called Series B, and that will be sold when we need it. We only want to sell the bonds when we need it. There are spend down requirements. You have to spend 85% of the bond proceeds within 3 years or have a reasonable expectation to do that. We can't sell bonds and then have it sit in the account and earn interest. That's nice, but you're supposed to spend the money, right? So that's also, we want to spend the money, service the debt, and that stuff save the taxpayers as well. So, but this is the conceptual cash flow. We had a much more detailed one, but for conceptually, just want to share what happens is we're spending money on one project, the San Antonio campus. We need to have some seed money to pay for the architect and engineering planning for the middle school. And then we also need to have some money to get the next architect on board for phase 2. And so that's kind of the concept of how it goes, is you always have something in design and planning, and you need to have that money in there where you can't spend it all on kind of one thing. So here's our funding sources. Measure N has, and I did this like just the other day, so this is kind of what's in the bank at this time. Measure N has about $15 million in the bank. And then Fund 210, there are proceeds that the San Antonio campus generated. We had a donation from a developer of $4.5 million. We had lease revenue that we earned, right? All those things is revenue we can use, but it's not really part of Measure N. So the Bond Oversight Committee, their only responsibility is to make sure the bond proceeds are spent down. So we will be spending down Measure N first. And then we'll use any remaining funds in Fund 210, which is another $11.5 million. And then Fund 210, we have a separate cost center from the Sembratto TDR. That's where that money's at. So the TDR money is, the plans are to use it for construction. It could be for the San Antonio campus. It could be for another school project. It's flexible, but it should be commingled in Fund 211. So we kept it out of Fund 211, and it's liquid and flexible. Then we have Measure E, which is gonna be, when we get the first deposit, we'll put in a separate fund for accounting called Fund 212. That'll be $350 million. And the next two are really unknowns. We are gonna be applying for state funding, and we'll talk more about that on the 20th of April, when we bring those resolutions to you. So we are eligible for some state funding for modernization and new construction, but you have to get in line, put your application in, and then you wait. And you wait, and you wait. You might wait 3 years. And then when you get approved, you say, okay, well, we've already done the project. And then you ask for them to give you the money in the back end. So in the future, 3 or 4 years down the road, there's a potential to get some state funding. And some of it can be for new construction and modernization. Yes, Shai.
Is there in-state funding, do they prioritize LCFF districts over these state districts, or are we all just in?
Everybody gets in line, but then other people have different, like, I guess, factors, or like they have different weighting. Yeah, everybody has to get in line though. So yeah, other districts might have a better chance at getting it. Some schools get it if they have it's called hardship, if they've got financial hardships. Some of them are applying for earthquake seismic funds, because some of our schools, especially along the Hayward Fault, many of those are older schools, and that's the next fault that they say is a great danger. So over the years, our schools, from a seismic standpoint, have been upgraded many, many years ago. But schools that have not been, if it's unreinforced masonry, that's always a concern. So but so we will know more about that. And then, as you know, we have a TDR program that is still active with the city of Mountain View. We have the Malone Geyer TDR. We're not sure when that one will come in. It has been entitled by the city, and that's about $10 million. We will be splitting half of that with the city of Mountain View. So if those funds come in, those are all also proceeds that we can use for construction. And then we did a very simple interest calculation, because we know all of the $350 million will not all be in the bank at the same time. But when you have money in the bank, it is working capital. It does earn interest. All of our funds, general fund, bond fund, it all earns interest. So if we just did $350 million times 2%, that's $7 million. It won't be the entire amount. It'll fluctuate also on what the interest rates are. Interest rates are flexible. We get those reports from the county every quarter, and then we update our budget with interest payments. So the total potential funds that we know at this time is approximately $394. And just like our general fund, this is a budget. These numbers will, the top 4 numbers will not change. But then the bottom 3 could change, right? And we don't know what those are going to be. But for budgeting standpoint, this is kind of what we're using as what our funding sources are at this time. And then we did a bullet on the bottom that we just sold $95 million of Series A in this month. Bond issuances, which we talked about at a previous meeting. This is the schedule. We did a little bit better than the 4.75% of the borrowing rate, which is good, which we'll highlight in April. But the first series was this year, so we do expect it to be about every other year. We'll be needing cash approximately, depending. And it might vary. It might be a little bit longer in between, it depends. And so we plan on issuing. We have already issued Series A. Series B would be sometime in probably early 26, depending on what, or early 28 rather. Then 30 and 32 will be the bond issuances. Market impacts. How could we not resist putting a sign of a gas station on there? In November 24, the same fall that we passed Measure EE, the state issued their state bond. And that's where we would ask for the state funding from. That was approved by the state voters. most California school districts passed the local bond measures in 2024, so we're not the only district passing bonds. So there is a surge of projects submitted to the Office of Public School Construction in DSA. So there's a lot of schools all passing bonds. And they're all going to construction, similar timeline as we are. There's a lot of K-12 consultants, architects and contractors that are spread thin. There's only so many contractors that are qualified to do this work. So there's a supply and demand that we need to be mindful of. The Los Angeles fires, and it has impacted the Division State Architect. And there's always concern. There's a fire along 280 the other day. I'm like, oh my gosh, it's fire season, it's only March. So we have to be mindful is the Division of State Architect only has so many staff. And they have to review these drawings. They also have a bandwidth issue. And so sometimes they say, well, why does it take so long? Well, you have every school district and they review everything on the drawings. They don't just rubber stamp things, they review everything. And so that's where you have to be mindful of the delays. Going through DSA is we're required to do that, but you're sometimes you're basically beholden to their schedule. There haven't been any of these since COVID about these material shortages. In the old days, if you needed an HVAC unit, you could call a supply house, they had it on the shelf. It's not like that anymore. If you guys have had to order a washer, a dryer, refrigerator in your house, how do they not have this in stock? Well, that's similar to us. They don't have light fixtures laying around. So the early procurement, buying it early and having the contractor hold it or store it, or we store it, will save us money, but then also avoid delays. So we need to be mindful of that. Some of our planning has to take that into account. Some of the new tariffs driving up the cost of precious metals, materials, copper, heavy metals. We just talked the other day about Chromebooks costing $100 more because of the Pentium chips and things. The tariff does have an impact on cost. Steel, wood, big thing that we use in buildings. And then the potential war impacts. How will that affect fuel prices? I know as everything we buy, our maintenance and ground staff, they need gasoline for the lawnmowers, they need gasoline for their trucks. Our teachers and staff, our contractors, they drive to the work sites, right? All the tractors and heavy equipment that are used in construction require gasoline. So that is going to have an impact and will drive up some prices. So we need to make sure we have some escalations and contingency for that. In January of this year, the Division of State Architect, every other year, usually they change the building code. They upgrade the building code. This is where we talk about Title 24 for lights, right? All the different things that are required to be inspected, that has cost. So anytime you update, we were lucky, we got our San Antonio campus into DSA before the code changed. And so if you submit your drawings before the code changes, they go off the previous building code. That saves money because the building code changes and then the building code gets more expensive because they add more requirements. Those requirements become more expensive. And then cost escalation impacts. Just going to the store, buying groceries, everything is becoming more expensive. And the Federal Reserve tries to tamper inflation with interest rates, but they can only do so much. When there's a war going on, we hope that this will end soon, but it does have a minor impact. And if my daughter has a Prius, I couldn't believe how much it cost to fill up her Prius, right? It's like, what? So just be mindful as we talk about what contingency for. It's kind of like the next couple slides. Contingencies is like your reserves. And it's very expected and normal for our consultants, architects, engineers, that they have cost go up every year too. So something you're paying an architect for, their fees go up. All the special inspections, their fees go up. So if everybody else cost goes up, they're going to raise their fees as well. So we have to assume at least 3 to 5% per year minimum. Change orders is not something we like to see, but it's normal. There's an unforeseen condition. As we're modernizing classroom, the building, some of the wood is rotted from the sun or damaged from something. We have to replace it. And we can't see some of these things before we start construction. So that's why we do a lot of pre-construction surveys and pre-construction investigation and make sure you uncover as many unknowns so it gets in the bid documents to avoid these change orders. but you have to have a change order contingency. This stuff does happen. There's project contingency, so we will have a construction contingency and then overall project contingency, which covers other consultants and things that might come up. So if we have to hire a special consultant to deal with an issue, that we have a little bit of a contingency and some buffer for that. There is program level contingencies, and right now we're plugging in about $10.5 million. And that's kind of like our reserve. So if another project is over budget, we take it from the project contingency or the program contingency. That is board action. So anytime there's changes in the budget, we'll bring that to the board for approval. And so if we have to take it, but if a project comes under budget, then we'll put that to the bottom of the line. We'll put that in the program contingency. So as projects finish, and if we're under budget, that money falls to the bottom. But if projects become more expensive, we have to pull it from somewhere else. And what we don't want to do is where we get into this thing where we can't finish all the projects, and if we do, then we have to reduce the scope. Like maybe we won't replace the HVAC, but we'll do the lights and roof, right? So those are decisions that might have to come up. The program reserve and escalation, we have about $15.2 million in there for escalation. Unforeseen circumstances at the program level is a last resort, and then board approval is going to be required for that. So anytime we're moving project budgets or program budgets, we'll bring back to the board, and we'll be at every meeting. We'll periodically, as projects are being closed out or added, we'll be asking the board to approve the budget periodically. This is our initial program budget phase 1. So I want to stop there, but so I'll make sure you guys have a chance to stop me.
Yeah, can we actually have 5 minutes for a bio break?
Oh.
Yeah, thank you.
Everybody has to go at
Let's
the
make
same
an
time.
announcement or something. We're making an announcement.
Sure, we're taking a
recess?
5-minute recess.
We're taking a 5-minute recess. I'm gonna go stand in the sun.
Yeah.
We are back from recess to resume our meeting. There.
So, I want to kind of highlight some of it, and we've gone over this and we've kind of refined it a little bit. This is not the final project list or the final order of projects. The first phase is, but the rest of it is really up to, direction, discussion. So I want to highlight, kind of go over some overviews and some of the planning. So if you look at the first page, is the San Antonio campus. And the estimated construction cost is approximately 110 million. Our design build contract at this time, the not to exceed amount with block is 116 million. But of that 116 million, there's money that's built in there for contingency. So I want to kind of highlight in a separate row or separate column rather, so you can see that. So the 110 million is the current cost. That's design and build. That's not the soft cost. The design, there's a design and construction contingency. So if we don't use those, and if DSA starts adding things to the scope, and it would come out of there. The soft cost is all the other things that I highlighted on there on the project list, which are special consultants, the DSA inspector of record, DSA fees, PG&E fees for their engineering things. All that's come out of that bucket called soft costs. Then the furniture, fixtures, and equipment, that depends on the project. So right now, we don't anticipate having to spend that much, but that's what I'm putting in there for now. Because when we start moving into that building, there might be furniture that might be repurposed and used again. But for purposes of budgeting, that's in there. And once we have more answers on the exact number of desks, chairs, and things that are needed, and that number will be adjusted. So the total amount all in is 129 for the project. And then we also have some extra money in a column called project contingency. If anything else in these different categories comes over budget, it can come from there first before it comes from the program, right? So every project, we've got extra money in there for that. The next item on phase one, because these are all expected for the fall of 28, is block and Egan reconfiguration. These numbers are not vetted because we don't know exactly what the scope is. So we just put it as a placeholder of about $2.8 million. It could be a little more, it could be a little less. But until we have the exact scope figured out, we will adjust that accordingly. Once we have the final determination exactly what we're going to do at those campuses, then we would bid these out, have much sharper numbers for you. But for conceptual illustrative purposes, this is kind of like what we're planning at this time. Any questions on kind of like phase one discussion? Yeah, so.
When we had our discussion about the middle school model, there was some talk about like demolition or removal of the existing portables. And so that would that be part of this budget?
Yeah, I'm out of there. You know, as we've been getting really good at removing portables. The last couple of summers, we've removed some. We have a good idea, you know, it's roughly $15,000 to $20,000 per portable. But if there's like demolition of site work and we have to restore asphalt, concrete, that it gets a little bit more expensive. Shutting off the utilities to these buildings is not that really bad to do or expensive, but it's really the site work that's the most expensive. When we removed some portables at Springer 2 summers ago, and as we removed the portables, some of the asphalt underneath was in not great condition. So we did a change order because you don't know what's underneath the portables, and we resurfaced some of the asphalt, which is good, and it's good. It's much safer. It's a nicer way to do it. But that's a perfect example of sometimes the asphalt, the ramps, the slopes had to be reworked. At Almond last summer, we removed 2 portables, and then some of the ramps. You know, the ramps, sometimes they build asphalt on top to get a ramp, so it goes right into the classroom ramp. And then that asphalt has to be taken out and reworked. So at Almond, we did have some money budgeted. It was about, I think, $6,000, but you know, this is a much bigger project than just removing 2 portables. So yeah, to answer your question, once we know more on the exact scope, then we'll adjust this budget accordingly.
Okay, and you said 15 to 20,000, is that to remove each portable?
That's the cost just for mobile modular. To remove the portable, so we have to pay for that if it's at least portable. Mobile modular has to come out. We have to pay for the disconnect, we will pay for all the disconnecting of the electrical and utilities. And the wiring and all that, and then mobile modular will come in, they lift the portable up, they put it on these big. Sleepers, and then they come in with a truck and they just pick it up and take it away, but we have to pay for that. And then if there's any other site work, that all has to be done.
Eric, does that kind of, is there a risk there of, triggering the path of travel stuff or?
We'll have to work with the architect and talk to them about that, because we're removing buildings. DSA doesn't require you to go to them, but they might ask you about path of travel.
Okay.
Yeah, so we have to be mindful of that as well. The good news is that those were installed, they, especially the ones that block, they have the big high concrete foundation. Most of that is pretty quiet. It's just the one portable that might be over there. If that's not gonna be a building anymore, the district can just restore it as is. Yeah, so but the architects will be taking that into account as well. The next phase. Staff is in kind of consultation with, as we were doing our master plan, and we're talking about which campuses we should go to first. And this is really not set in stone, and I want to make that very clear. This is just our initial first pass of like, what would phase 2 look like? Do we have enough cash? And can we do 3 schools in the summer of 2029 first, or can we only afford to do 2 at this time? And then the summer after that, we would do 3. So that's something we have to talk about. But I want to kind of highlight our first pass was to look at, and we have some notes off to the side for summer 2029. And it's not that far away, because we're really, 3 years away. And by doing so, we would have to make a decision. I'd like to have this decision made by June. That will give us enough time to get the architect involved, all the planning and programming. And as staff comes back in the fall, that's when the architect will have the meetings. And we would start talking about what is the scope going to actually be. And then we start developing drawings, getting those ready to go. And that gives us really 3 years until we have to start the project. And that's about how long it takes to do a project, with all the planning, DSA review, procurement and bidding. And then, you need about a 6-month ramp, have everything kind of organized, because we want to have everything organized by December, January, February. So when school ends in June, we hit the ground running. And that's for a successful summer modernization only, that is the timing. If we did new construction, well, new construction could start any time of the year. It's very disruptive, though, to a campus to do demolition and site utility work while school's in session. If you can do some of that work right before school gets out, and all the very loud, disruptive demolition and movement of utilities and all that, if that could happen during the summer, it's a little bit less disruptive. The good news is our campuses will be safe. It'll all be fenced in. These contractors that do school construction, they know how to work on an active campus with kids on campus, and they know how to work on a campus when there's no one around. They will be fenced off, it'll be very safe, but the noise is always sometimes. When we would do state testing, we would tell the contractor, can you please have no loud noises during the state testing window, and they would comply, right? So that's a perfect example of working with our contractor partners. They will work with us to make sure it doesn't, disrupt the educational component. We try to talk, and we have some notes on the side. Some of the initial numbers in the facility master plan we thought were a little, I think, over budgeted for the restroom upgrades. So we did, the first column, and it didn't go on every page, but the first column is like the initial facility master plan, and then kind of like a revised as we've gone through the budget numbers to revise it, right?
Yeah, so I actually want to ask about that, because when I was looking back at the facilities master plan, and in 2024, when we were looking at this stuff, the number that we had for the modernization, all campuses hard cost was like 83 million. But then looking at these spreadsheets, it's like 140. And I can't tell why that changed that much.
I don't think during the master plan, we have the numbers in there for cost escalation. And so we're doing about 5% per year.
Yeah, but even like the second column, even before the escalation, before the soft costs, before everything, like the second column here, as I understand the spreadsheet, is the hard costs,
Mhm.
estimated construction costs.
Yes,
And so like when we were doing sort of the prioritization exercise back in 2024, that hard cost for modernization was $82 million. But looking at this spreadsheet, the hard cost for modernization add up to like 135, 140.
which are you looking at, just phase two only?
No, for all of the, like the total for all of the modernization phases, so that's like phases 2 through 5. And like, I mean, it seems like that's why all the other stuff that we talked about prioritizing is not in this plan. It's because the hard cost on the modernization is now 140 million. And I hadn't seen anything that sort of explained why that went up so much in 30 years.
So we can obviously bring that back and talk more about some of like the assumptions that we're using for construction. We can bring that back.
Okay.
Can I ask a kind of goofy question? Of course. So, I know you talked about this a little bit before, but we know that DSA has to get involved in certain things, and certain things they don't. And so, do all of these things trigger DSA involvement, or are they just because we're doing them all at the same time, that triggers DSA? Like, I could paint without DSA involvement, right?
Correct.
But because we want to do this in one as one project at one time, there are things in here that trigger that DSA involvement that need to be done. And there would not be a reason to separate them out into non-DSA tasks and DSA tasks.
Yeah, and then when we get through the end of the slide deck, I'll talk about that, but to answer your first question, DSA has 3 things they look at.
Yep.
They will look at structural safety, so any structural alterations. They'll look at fire life safety, and then ADA compliance, and they call that access compliance. So anything that's structural, fire life safety, which is fire alarms. And then access compliance is path of travel, ADA compliance, bathroom configurations, ramps, traveling for complying with the American Disabilities Act. So those are the 3 things that DSA looks at. They also have a threshold. If you're going over a certain dollar value, that triggers DSA review. That depends on the project. But also on a side question, if we wanted to paint the front of a campus or paint a building, we don't have to go to DSA for that. But oftentimes, if you have the whole campus kind of torn up, you might as well paint it at the same time. But as we get near the end of today's presentation, I'll talk about is we might want to, before the summer of 29, we start doing modernization, would we want to maybe paint 1 or 2 campuses between now and then? Is that another project? We talked about our PTAs, that could be a funded cause or things like that. We could have a painting party or something, but yeah, but that's a great question. Yeah.
Mostly for public
Yeah.
knowledge.
If we re-roof a project, depending on the dollar value, depending on how extensive you get, if you replace the roof with the same weight and
Right.
you're not increasing the weight, HVAC can be replaced sometimes as a maintenance project. It just depends on the extensiveness.
Right.
Usually if you replace an HVAC unit, when it breaks, you don't have to go to DSA. But then DSA will say, okay, is it Title 24 compliant? Is that unit compliant? If you do re-lamping and re-lamp a classroom, that's not, you don't have to go to DSA. But if you, changing bulbs and all that, but if you just change the whole thing, it has to be to Title 24. Yeah, so DSA does have a lot of oversight, because they want you as you're modernize your schools, they want you to be compliant with the new code. They get fees for that too.
Yeah. No.
They have a vested interest, but it's important because then it ensures that the schools are built correctly and modernized and that they're done with a lot of oversight.
I got, this is kind of a catch me up maybe, but also a refresh maybe for some people is, how did we decide on the order of the schools for the phasing of the projects?
Yeah, and the good news is the only thing that we know for sure is gonna be middle school modernization and the San Antonio campus. This is just a kind of a, I guess it's an exercise. We haven't decided anything yet.
Oh, okay.
So so today it will be, and the board doesn't have to decide today. I think my job today is to make sure we get a lot of questions answered and get feedback, and then anything that you want us to bring back to you. And then we'll bring back things to you about, can we do 3 schools in phase 2? And then which schools are the highest priority? I can tell you, all the schools need work. So, we can never make a bad decision of which schools go first. It's gonna be a timing component in which ones, would make sense. I know there's been discussion, can we, Oak and Santa Rita, there were certain things they might not have got done 25 years ago. And should we go with them and modernize them first? Because they didn't get a new NPR or they didn't get some new buildings. Is that maybe, or should we prioritize that school first? So there's, but nothing's been set in stone.
Eric and I also talked about, because of that fact, right now, everyone, because I've been bothering him, like, is there one school that has like way more needs than another school?
Yeah.
They all have needs in all of these areas of modernization, but we talked about getting some direction. Doesn't need to be today if there's more discussion or information that needs to come, of trying to solidify what the phase 2 projects will be. But I don't even know if it behooves you to delineate beyond phase 2, because by 2029 or a little bit earlier, when we get to phase 3, there may be a school that rises to the top where everything is failing. And if we've, for whatever reason, put that into phase 5, like, I don't know if it makes sense to really scope everything out, but to really solidify phase 2 now would be most beneficial, I think.
So to read this, the numbers are tied to each school, but the order of schools is arbitrary.
Correct. And that's why we, when you look at this list, they all need all of these items done, right, in some form or fashion. For example, Oak and Santa Rita, we just replaced their Bell PA system recently, so that won't need to be done, so there might be some savings there. But a Bell PA system per school is about $60,000 roughly. So you times that by 9 schools, that's $500,000 just in Bell PAs only, right? Nothing else. This is like an initial go through of the budget. But then and we wrote some notes, restroom upgrade estimate is reduced because we don't think that, we thought the number of the master plan was too much restroom upgrades. Students spend the least amount of time in restrooms, right? So, but we want to make sure they're nice and that they're safe and they're clean. But we need to be mindful of that, and they need to be upgraded to be ADA compliant. The path of travel estimate is an estimate only, like we have for both schools about $1 million. It could be more than that. It just depends on what DSA talks about. And then at Oak, we wrote TK shade canopy. Oak has a lot of their outdoor seating under the photovoltaic panels, the solar panels. And so as you go, if you're looking at Oak from the playground, from kind of like the front of the parking lot, there's a lot of lunch tables and things like that. That's their natural shade, which is wonderful. But then the TK, that's a budgetary number, and that would be for all in cost to put some new shade out in the TK area. Again, if we had made it a smaller TK shade thing, then the number would go down, but that required TSA approval, right? And could we do that project ahead of time? We could, but then it might trigger ADA compliance, so you have to decide, do you do it all at once, or do we piecemeal it? But, all these, some of these can be done in piecemeal, but sometimes when you're doing a full classroom wing, it makes a lot more sense, it's more cost effective. Economies of scale to take the roof off, do the HVAC, do the lighting upgrade, the wiring. Carpet paint, do all that at one time in one summertime, that sometimes it's more cost effective, and you get a lot more done. If you do it at one time. The more you piecemeal projects, you're paying for double project management fees, double architect fees, double DSA submittal fees. So sometimes it's better to do it all at once if you can. But if you want to do a Bell PA system, you can do some of those one-offs or painting also. So this is kind of what we're thinking from an initial standpoint, and this is not the final numbers. But from working with our architect and facility master plan and with Cumming Group, to really kind of what we call scrubbing the numbers, going through the numbers, revising them, and making sure that we've got enough money in there. What you don't want to do is like under budget and then not have enough money in there. So that's kind of where these numbers are coming from. This is Oak and Santa Rita, and then the next phase, or at least the next set of projects would be the summer of 2030. And this is where I think the discussion is for, and Sandra did a good job of explaining it. I think as we go farther out, we have to have some flexibility if things come up. If we could do 3 schools, and if we feel we could get 3 schools done during the summer of 29, and if the cash flow works out, that is an option. And maybe we do 3 schools that summer and 2 in the summer of 2030, or if we can do 3 and 3, that's great. But we also have to be mindful of cash flow. We can't issue all $350 million of bonds at once. And so you can't do all the projects at once, you have to spread it out over multiple years. Just like we have a general fund multi-year projection, this is really a multi-year expenditure plan for the bond funds. So you're basically spreading out your expenditures over a certain amount of year. And you have a certain amount of revenue coming in to fund those projects. And really our bond program budget, it's just like our general fund budget, it's a multi-year expenditure plan. That's a good kind of way to kind of like look at it a little bit. Yes, so.
For some reason, the Gardner Bullis expenses were left off the phase 3 totals,
Yeah, and
in the first section.
Yeah, so if you look at, on the blue is the actual number. The blue number that goes across the spreadsheet, that number matches on the 57,671,
Yeah.
it does match up. Yeah, the number didn't tabulate on the bottom.
Yeah.
Yeah, Brian pointed out, I'm like, sorry. But we did double check this, the numbers in blue that go across, that's the number that we're going off of. So this is a perfect example, and this is like the high level kind of overview of it. That's really kind of what we're thinking for phase 3. And I want to reemphasize that none of the scope has been finalized or the timing or what schools are going first. But just to give the board some questions to consider and things to look at. Phase 4 would be Loyola Covington, same program. Every school budgets are going to be different. But different schools have different amount of permanent buildings. None of these projects in modernization, we're not modernizing portables, we're not modernizing rented buildings, even portables that we own, some of the campuses we own portables, we're not going to invest bond dollars in aging portables, it's going to be only for the permanent classroom buildings. So this is kind of what phase 4 would look like, very similar. And then if you notice on one of the columns, there's a thing about escalation. And in our calculations is that yearly escalation goes up by a year. So it will go up 5%, 10%, 15%. As we go out on further things, we have more money in that escalation factor because things do cost more per year. Yes, Jim.
Sorry, and I know it. Things are flexible and it may not matter. I just, so phase 2 is 2029, phase 3 is 2030. When is phase 4?
Phase 4, we can put the year on because it's hard to decipher. It's hard for us to put a year on. We would think it'd be the following summer.
Okay,
Yeah, but
And
again, we
but
get,
then that would
yeah,
push phase five out, and then the
Correct.
portables like Gardner Bullis would say 2032, and I know that's a different project.
Yeah, I
I'm
think
just-
that's a discussion
Yeah.
that you all need to have is,
yeah,
are those a bigger priority than some modernization in the phasing of things?
for example, let's say we had, if the cat flow works out. And during phase 2 or 3, we wanted to do 2 modernizations and Gardner Bullis portables. If we have enough funding available, we could do that, or it could be in phase 3. It's, I don't wanna say it's like plug and play, but it's really looking at the prioritization of
Sure.
what's the most important priority.
Sure,
Yeah.
I was just trying to. Because 2032 seems to be a magic number of when funding stops or all the bond, I like. I'm just curious how we fit it all in, that's all.
Yeah,
Okay,
I think if we're doing an every other year issuance of 26, 28, 30, and 32.
Mhm.
When we issue bonds in the summer of, sometime in 2032, that bond issuance would be our last issuance.
okay,
And then those funds, it might take us 2 years to spend those funds down. So there might be construction or projects going on in the summer of 2030, yeah. And then if there's state funding and there's more money, that there might be, there'll be more funding available. And then we would look at our project, this master plan, and say, oh, we've got some extra state funding of an extra $10 million that will allow us to do another project.
okay,
And it could be, that would be a decision of which project, what do we do with those extra funds?
okay.
So that takes care of, kind of phase 4, or some of those thoughts. And then Egan and Block. Our middle schools need to be upgraded. They all need work, so then there's, and this is all modernization, none of this is new construction. Some of the buildings out there are,
Egan in particular.
yeah, I think Egan in particular, some of the buildings are, and, they do have that newer building that's in the main office, the 2-story building. But the rest of the campus, the buildings are, they're 50+ years old. There is a threshold requirement for DSA, and these are one of the things that we'll have to talk about. Is sometimes when you go through a building and start, going through the whole envelope of the roof and the HVAC and the lights and flooring and all these replacements, TSA will say, hey, we want you to tear down that building and build a whole new one. And so we'll have to be very mindful that we don't get ourselves where DSA requires that, and it's called a threshold requirement. So, the DSA wants you to build a new building. But there's only so many bond dollars. It would be great if we had unlimited funds and we could rebuild every single campus from scratch, but we just don't. No school district does. So we'll be mindful of when DSA, once you start doing more dollar value, if the dollar value exceeds a certain threshold, DSA will say, we think we should replace the whole building. And then your budget is shot, right? So that'll be something that when we work with our architect partners, they make sure we do designs that don't trigger that threshold requirement. But there is a building at Egan, and some of them are older. Does it make sense for us to modernize a very old building that has some issues? Maybe we should tear that one building down, right? But not every building we can afford to do that. So that'll be some of the discussions. As we go through our bond program, is which buildings should be replaced. Some of the ones in Egan, the very back corner of the campus, there's like an old kind of a choir room, breakout room. It's kind of like a modular building. And then next to that modular building on these like sleepers are 2 portables. That whole back part of the campus is not in great condition. So when I look at that campus, what part of that should we just say, we're gonna demolish it and build new? Or can we hold off and do something else? So that'll be part of our discussion in master planning. This is not done. Our prioritization is let's get middle school moved in the fall of 28. And then what modernization money do we have to do work at Egan Block? It doesn't mean that it's not gonna get done. And that'll be kind of a discussion, is prioritization, which one should be done first? Do we do Block first? Do we do Egan first? Can we do it both at the same summer? Should we move one of these schools up sooner than later? So all good questions to ask. The next item is really kind of like phase 6, which is Gardner Willis. We did some cost estimating with Timber Quest several years ago. We went up to Sacred Heart School in Atherton. And they just opened up Hoover School in Palo Alto. And they did a prefabricated building with mass timber called Timber Quest. And they just opened up Hoover School, very successful project. We've gone on a couple of tours. Sandra and I had our hard hats on and we were in safety vests. And we toured these schools and some of our board members, when we went up to Atherton, gosh, it's been, I think, almost 4 years ago. That is one of the options we're talking about, and they're beautiful buildings. You will not know that's a prefabricated. Prefabricated is not affordable. It's not a modular. It's just a different way of building it that's quicker and more cost effective. So a lot of school districts are going to this. So initially, we're budgeting approximately $21 million to do new classrooms at Gardner Willis. And when I earlier Stella mentioned about the portables, we might have to put in portables there to get that project done. But then where I wrote on the next line down about the program is that could come out of there, or we could build it into the project cost. So I think that's fine to do. And then maybe there's another $1 million there for security cameras and things like that. So it's all flexible, but we want to make sure that you understand there's some real cost for this. And then if we waited till 2032 to do this, we think it's gonna cost $21 million, but if we did it sooner, it might cost less, right? So that's just something to think about as we go through the bond program, is get our initial prioritization list going and then start building and constructing, and then we can make some adjustments. But Sandra said it, sometimes stuff comes up, the fire alarms, some of the things are aging, so we have to be mindful of that, so.
So maybe this wouldn't make sense, but I was just wondering if there might be any efficiencies that we could gain by possibly, moving this project up sooner and using some of the portables that we still have at our junior high campuses rather than having to bring in new portables to house students. Because like there's a cost to removing and I assume installing and all that stuff. So, and maybe it would make sense because it's not, those sites are not that close to Gardner Willis, but I just would be interested in seeing, if it would be advantageous financially to house them in portables we already have. I mean, we don't own them, but
or could they move the existing portables somewhere
Over there.
else, right? Cause that whole wing is just portables.
Yeah.
Right, the whole little lane.
Yeah, there's 8 portables, and then there's also, there's like a little, like storage building, there's a custodial closet, there's a bathroom building,
Portable
right?
bathroom, yeah.
There's bathrooms there. And what, we had to call, Mobile Modular, the summer before because the floor in there is so old. The flooring need to be replaced. Well, it's at least portable restroom. And they fixed it and cleaned it up, but that's a perfect example. It's just not a great situation at portables. And portables are fine to have. They're normal for schools to have these. But only for a short time. You don't want to have them for an extended period of time. They just don't last. But this is a perfect example of working as a team and with our architect partners as we start going through the bond program, determining which site should go first. And then if the idea is, I believe we called it the camp schools. This is like 20+ years ago, that at the at Egan, they had a lot of portables in the front, closer to Portola and San Antonio. And as schools were modernized, this is like 25 years ago, as a previous bond before Measure N, as their schools were being modernized, they would have a whole group of kids go to the camp school while their school is being modernized. And that almost goes to like what you're thinking with in every school, it kind of had to do it. And so the schools were relocated to the camp school, their schools were modernized, and then once their school was done, they would leave the camp school and then the next school would go over there. Way before my time, but I know that was a way to kind of do it. But it is not easy to do work while there's kids on campus. It's just hard to do it.
And that's where BCS is right now.
Right.
So we don't have a space to do a camp school.
Well, we might have some space in 2028 for a block. when we move to the middle school model, then we might have some space that a portion of a school could move at least.
I like that.
Yeah, I would probably only recommend that for any new construction.
Yeah, the gardener.
I think if we can, if it works out and, you can do the modernization during the summer and not be disruptive, that's, I think that we do need to do. Like new construction and new classrooms. Gardner Bullis does not have a lot of extra open spaces to put students in. Yeah, we could utilize a break room or something, but there's only so many. It's hard to relocate and find 8 teaching spaces that is adequate. And you don't want teachers and kids to be in spaces. No, we're gonna cordon off the library. It's not probably a great long-term solution or even short-term, right? So we need to be mindful of that in the planning purposes.
And Eric, can I ask you another question? Because, when you're talking about modernization projects, the way that they're presented here. And. I mean, I understand we have to worry about, is there money? But another thing that we have to worry about is, are there people that can do these projects? And so is it realistic to do 2 modernization projects in the summer or 3 modern, like, what do? If money were not an issue, like, are there people to do these jobs? Because do we want 2 or 3 different contractors or I don't know who they are, but let's just say for the sake of argument, it's Block Construction that's gonna do these modernization projects. And so do they have enough people to do 2 or 3 of them at a time, or are we like getting via builders to do one and Block Construction to do another and somebody else to do
This is why we
another?
have a pool, right?
Yeah. Yeah, so we have a pool of architects that would be doing different things at each campus, and then one of the pool of lease back builders that we'll be doing. And we haven't done that yet, because we're not there in that position yet, but we will be doing that. If you can have one architect or one builder focus on one campus, is usually the better way to do it. But I've done projects where we've had 2 architects designing 2 campuses, but one builder doing both projects. But it is a bandwidth issue.
Yeah.
They only have so many project engineers,
Sure.
so many project managers. Most of the general contractors in Santa Clara Valley use a lot of the similar subs. The people who do the electrical, the plumbing, the drywall, the painting,
Mhm.
the HVAC, the roofing. And so there's also a bandwidth issue during the summertime. It's the busiest time.
Yep.
And everybody is on a tight timeline for schools, so you pay a little bit more for that,
Mhm.
right? And then also, if everybody's booked up, and you say, give me a price, the price will be a lot higher because they already have enough work. So if you had bid it out early.
Right, the more we can get in the queue,
Yeah.
the
Okay.
better.
Right.
So the idea is if you
Later.
bid things out early, it's better. If you bid it out the last minute, they're gonna give you a
Sure.
price that's probably, they'd be happy to get it, because they're gonna give you maybe a little bit of a premium.
So, but it is not unrealistic to do 2 or 3 campuses in
No.
the summer. Okay,
No, but the early procurement
it's,
has to be comparative,
all right,
yeah.
okay.
Shelley, I'm wondering if we want to do a public comment before we continue like
Oh,
discussion and what have you.
Eric done with his
All right,
presentation.
I think you're done with your
Oh, almost.
presentation. Oh,
Yeah.
sorry.
That's okay. So the very last thing on the slide, it's okay. Coming up. The last slide is, we talked about the bond issuance cost, and it's gonna be a little bit less than that. That's what we're putting in there. Interim housing is the temporary portables. Program coordination is non-project management services. Program implementation, program management, that might be project managers, people helping us manage individual projects. Program management support, the trailer, copier utilities, where, if we're gonna be running the program, where would we run it from? So we have to find a place for that. And then this is the 2 contingency buckets of the program contingency of a $350 million bond, that's 3%, 10.5 million. And then project contingency and escalation, we've got about $15 million built in there extra to account for that. So these are things that when we're budgeting a project, the 36 million of program management, that's around 10%. It's actually less than 10% of the total proceeds available. So when we look at our funding sources and the amount of projects, about $390 million of projects. But we can move things around and this is only modernization. We can talk about new construction. And if there's something you want us to bring out and bring back for like, hey, we want to get an idea of how much it would cost to add a new building here, a new building there, we can bring that back. That doesn't need to be decided today, but we wanted to kind of do like high level, overview of like the program itself. And I've got 2 slides next is really, today we're asking for some direction to staff needed on the following by June is, the placement of the remaining Bullis charter school students at Egan and middle school model. We don't need that today, but we need it by June because we need to give the architect some direction of how many portables, what's going to be reconfigured at Block in Egan to make that happen. And then what elementary modernization or new construction should be included in phase 2. This is just for illustrative purposes. We haven't made any decisions on what school's going when. And then we'll bring this back to the board. We'll have a final revision of Measure N of allocating any remaining Measure N dollars, where we would allocate that to for that budget. And we would have your first approval of Measure EE budget based on the first list of projects, right? And so that's kind of like what we're asking for today. Don't need an answer today, which is great. But I'm happy to answer any other questions. I think there were good public comment.
So, we'll submit cards for public comment, or go to public comment. They're clarifying questions, not discussion questions for Eric. We can go to public comment. It's like we have one person for public comments, so she can have 3 minutes. Mitra?
Hi, ready to come stand?
Yes.
Okay,
Oh,
great. So that is public comment. Hi, everyone. My name is Mitra Larasport. I am an Oak parent, and I'm also a member of the Bond Oversight Committee with Emily. So I wanted to share, if it's helpful, 2 things that we've discussed often in our meetings that might be questions/comments for you all to consider. And thank you, Eric, for running our meetings so well. The first is maybe to reframe Jim's question. We have often wondered if you were to ignore the constraints of the bond issuance for a second, purely in terms of construction, how many schools could you front load the modernization for in the summer of 2029? In the most ambitious terms, could you even do 4 schools? And I understand there's a constraint on both the pool of contractors as well as staff time, but we wanted to know what was the number for that. And then the second thing we've discussed often as a group is in terms of declining enrollment or maybe flattening enrollment in the school district, is there a way we could prioritize TK and kindergarten modernization at some of these schools? Because that seems to be a part of the school enrollment process that is somewhat leaky or confusing for families, where we potentially lose families that could otherwise enroll in many years at LASD. And Emily, feel free to add to that if you like, but those are things that we've wondered might be, at least the TK kindergarten question, might be orthogonal to the way you've organized the modernization by school, but we just wanted to bring up in the context of larger questions about school population.
Thank you. Go to board discussion.
I'm sorry, there's like one more slide, so. Sorry. So just kind of next steps is we are working by summer and fall. We want to work on conceptual drawings for the middle school in phase 2. Are there any quick start projects the board wants staff to look into and get some estimates for on painting, any shade projects? Is it feasible to do a shade structure project now? We have to do some electrical assessments as we're doing work on our campuses. For example, if we do new construction in new classrooms, do we need to do any upgrades of the electrical to make sure the electrical can handle new projects in new buildings? And then we are working right now, we have a software that we've been using for our CUP program, and that's for contractor qualification. And then we'll be looking into the late summer, early fall to hire some staff, district support staff, to help support us with some of the accounting and program management as well. So that's my last slide, sorry.
I have a question.
Wait,
Yes.
is it a clarifying question? Because Brian has.
Oh, go ahead, no,
If it's a quick question, you can go ahead.
go ahead, it's okay.
Well, just a comment on this slide, the shade structures, I don't really understand
Yeah.
why
that was
those are
my
that
question.
expensive.
Sure.
And also, just, it's my understanding that like at Gardner Bullis, shade structures have triggered path of travel problems. So the notion that we would like prioritize that doesn't make a lot of intuitive
Sure.
sense to me.
Sure.
So,
That was my question,
Okay.
like,
There-
how is that a quick start project?
Well, Quick Start it's relatively easy because those are usually PC, they're called pre-checked. And there's already a design that's been DSA approved, so you would submit that design to DSA. DSA can stamp it out very quickly, you could schedule it and get it done very quickly. But if there is path of travel, then the project becomes more expensive, but the approval process of a shade structure is very quick. Or this kind of almost over the counter, they can check it very quick.
sure, well, sure, but it's just also, given where we are budget wise.
Sure.
These things, I don't know what the square footage of them are, but it seems like they're as expensive on a per square foot of shade space basis as like a classroom is. And so I don't understand why we wouldn't just have the PTAs buy pop-up canopies every couple of years instead.
Well,
And I don't, we don't need to get into all of those. But sorry, the main comment I wanted to make was, to off of what our speaker was saying, was that if you go back and look at the facilities master plan, TKK was actually higher priority in the original discussions than modernizations was. And so I think it makes a lot of sense to look at that. And also, as Eric, you commented like back at the very beginning, that all of our campuses are a little bit different, and all of them have different needs, and the communities have different desires. So it's a little counterintuitive to me that sort of this draft is kind of not exactly one size fits all, but it's like the same set of work at every campus. Whereas like my intuition is if you went and asked the Gardner Bullis community, they would rather have the permanent classrooms built than do the modernization if they had to pick a sequencing.
sorry, not to interrupt you, I'm sure that they would, but I think the reality is the classrooms that are there don't have HVAC, correct roofing, correct lighting.
Sure.
Correct, and so, I mean, I don't wanna speak for them. We have heard from them, they do want those 4 grades put into permanent buildings and out of their portables,
Right.
but I mean, in that sure, and we know Santa Rita wants an NPR, and we know these things, but we also have these other things that just simply have to be done.
Well, and that's where I think it would be helpful if we got more detail and context as far as like, what's the different experience? I don't really have a picture in my head of like, what does the Santa Rita classroom look like now versus what it's gonna look like after we do all of this. So I can then go explain to somebody. I mean, when we did a lot of community consultation in the course of, or not we, but like our consultants did a lot of community consultation, right? And Oak and Santa Rita are the two where like the work that we're currently planning to do almost didn't show up anywhere on the list of what they wanted. And so if we're gonna go to them and say, yes, we know that we asked you what you wanted and now we're ignoring you and here's why. And it sounds like from some of Eric's comments along the way, like some of this modernization work can maybe be done sort of like it's more efficient. I get it's more efficient to sort of do everything. I mean, it's maximally efficient to tear the building down, but I would like us to take sort of a harder look at like of some of this stuff, like either a better explanation of what exactly the benefits are so that we can sell it, or can we come up with a plan that's like, because some stuff has been done at some of the campuses, like can we come up with a plan that like gives Santa Rita the NPR and then does a little bit of the modernization for sort of the same overall cost? Like I think it's good that we're broadly spending the same amount of money on each campus, but different campuses have different. And also, it also depends what the campus looks like. If you're talking about like wayfinding and like making them look nice. And like, I think Santa Rita and Oak, like there's some campuses where the portables are like right in your face when you roll up the campus and it doesn't look great. And, having a new shiny new NPR would really give you a big bang for the buck in terms of wayfinding and and looks, whereas like other campuses, they don't have that issue, so other things are, so I just wanna make sure we're sort of being mindful and really thinking hard about what's appropriate for each
Can I
space.
ask for a little PowerPoint?
Sure.
Because the facilities master plan was conceived, created, whatever, before the pandemic. Now, since we've gone through the
Well, that's
pandemic,
not true, we did it in 2024. Yeah,
I'll think about the one I was, okay, never mind. I was just gonna say that I think like health and safety should be priority. So I mean, I get it that they would love a new shade canopy.
Well, but that's part of
Yeah,
like- but that's part of my question is like, because in the course of the pandemic, like we did HVAC work. Because we needed to be able to support that stuff, and
So
so,
why do we have to do it again now?
Well,
Like,
I
why?
think we did filter change work,
sure,
right?
right,
But we have, I mean, ask the guys, every week they are replacing one
Sure.
to three random failed systems, compressors, they're, you know, truly piecemealing those things
sure,
together.
sure. And no, I'm not like, as, you know, we're not making any decisions today,
Yes.
so I'm willing to take that feedback, but it's also, it's interesting that like. You know, I think Eric made a comment that like some HVAC stuff you can do on like a maintenance basis and doesn't trigger DSA. And so, you know, if a
Yeah.
lot of this, if a lot of the cost and then risk from path and travel stuff comes from DSA,
Right.
then that makes it. Makes me ask the question of like, well, what if we
Just piecemeal.
reduce, well, I mean, but like if you piecemeal it, but like none of the pieces trigger DSA, it's actually not clear to me that that's not just as cost efficient. As doing the whole building, hitting that threshold, triggering DSA, having to repave the parking lot, like. You know, it's sort of. Seems
Yeah.
like worth at least thinking.
This would not.
Oh no, I do have something.
Didn't mean to fill time while you do.
No, well, I mean, this relates to what I was saying earlier, but I would be interested, I guess, in seeing the Gardner Bullis, both the modernization and the new classrooms possibly moved up in the timeline if we decide that it would be advantageous to use, let's say, portable that block before we remove them to have students temporarily while work gets done. And I also am sort of partial to doing both the modernization and the new classrooms at the same time if possible, just to not have that campus be impacted multiple times.
I think that's a really good point.
Yeah.
To not have to keep going back to the same campus and disrupting it.
Yeah, and then my other comment would be that I would also want to prioritize Santa Rita as one of the earlier schools to be modernized, just and I'm not commenting on whether it should be an NPR or not, but just, you know, to get some funding and to have some work done.
That's a good idea. It's a lot to digest. Remember to come with a comment on it. I don't know, this is a question for Eric and his team, going back to health and safety again. But just to make sure that all of our buildings are up to, like, earthquake code, for example, right? I mean. I'll give you an example. That would just be. Like safety.
Okay, I got more. I'm sorry. And then regarding the quick start projects, I kind of wanted to plus one what Jim and Brian were saying. Like, I wouldn't be in favor of doing a quick start project if we're gonna like cascade it into all these other upgrades that we have to immediately execute on, like the fire alarms and the ADA compliance. And so, and like painting, it just seems like, isn't that typically like one of the last things you would do? You know what I mean? Like the paint's gonna get all scuffed if you do all this other work after. So that just doesn't really make sense to me. But possibly like if we're looking at TK only shade canopies, I mean, maybe that is something that it's like, oh, we are like
Well-
kind of getting two birds with one stone, where it's like we're doing a TK upgrade and it's like a standalone canopy, but not necessarily at every site, like.
Well, and I think we would have to have an understanding, like, does that trigger DSA? I mean, fine, they have we've approved this, you can put it in, but is that gonna be, oh yeah, you can put it in, and then by the way, we're gonna come and look at your school and go. Your path of travel isn't right, or you installed it, you know, your PTA or somebody installed something that wasn't compliant.
Yeah,
Like, I mean, is it really off the shelf and no drama? Because that.
But can I add to what you're just saying? Because I do agree with Brian that we should have the PTs pay for, I mean, shade structure, but that's not a big thing. But I think that they should pay for whatever it is that you and your team has agreed to. Like, they shouldn't like, you know, go to Home Depot and find a lovely shade structure, like, you know
Well,
what I
yeah,
mean? Like, it has to be something.
These
that-
are very
these are
different.
$748,000.
They're metal structure.
I was just giving a very
Okay.
general
Yeah.
example. I don't, what I'm saying is, I'm not saying, honestly, go to Home Depot. I'm saying that I would like for them to pay for what Eric has put down. So that we can avoid some of the issues that we've had over the last few years of, you know,
are you saying like kind of like fundraise for,
Yes.
to like contribute toward,
yes.
right,
exactly.
right? Okay,
But something specific, like a shade structure.
You would like to see
Yes,
them
well,
turn
that's-
their fund cause, should they still have something like that?
Should they have it?
Right, yeah, okay.
And I think the idea of painting and or landscaping was. So many schools may not see something for many, many,
Mhm.
many years,
Sure.
and it's just a visible upgrade to the school, a little freshness, some nice new landscaping, some nice paint. That's not. It's not millions of dollars like these shade structures. But shows the community that their bond dollars are at work, you know, we value our schools, and should we want to go out for another bond, you know, as we're continuing this work down the road. Yeah, that was the thought behind the painting part.
Yeah, I mean, I think painting and like the wayfinding, that like
Yeah.
those things, I
Yeah.
think make a lot of
Yes.
sense. Replanting,
Right,
yeah.
I think I probably just don't value sort of like curb appeal as much as some other folks. In this meeting, because I like, yeah, I'm not really moved by curb appeal, so I actually, I do just like,
So you're not a real estate agent.
Selling your house anytime.
Yeah.
or my school. But, you know, like I care more about the efficiency and about getting it done like all in one fell swoop.
Here's the thing that I find a little frustrating is, I'm with you, like I would, if we're gonna spend money upfront while we have money, do it on something really meaningful and impactful, like whatever it is, not so much the painting and the new plants. Because we're doing that because so that people can see that their bond dollars are at work, so I'm thinking to myself, well, should we just communicate more that your bond dollars are at work, you can't see what it's doing, but this is what it's doing. But then the frustrating part is that people don't necessarily read all the communications that we send out or listen to everything. So we're kind of back at square one, but yeah, I think I'm with you. I think it's, I mean, I do think curb appeal is important, but I think it's great when funds are unlimited, but when funds are really limited and we have to make some decisions that, I mean, and I think it's up to us to communicate to the community that we are using your bond dollars, even if you can't see it.
Well, but I keep in mind that the community is not just our parents, right?
Right.
It's everybody who lives in the LASD area, right? And
Right.
who are using our campuses and things. And so for probably most of them, like the only information they're gonna get that the schools are being spent on is when they're driving past or going to a field or something, so.
Could be, but hopefully they're reading the town crier and not people. I don't know, it's just.
And there's
not
being
everything-
signage out front of schools, right? Your Measure EE dollars are at work. Or whatever we decide to do.
Oh, yes, and I've got more. So, you know, I mean, I think it's true for like a casual resident or something, like if they're not following along, they might not know how their tax dollars are being spent, but we have actually heard from several taxpayers, in fact, about, you know, wanting us to be fiscally responsible with these bond dollars. And so that's actually my priority rather than sort of like these cosmetic upgrades that tell a story. I really want to make sure that we're using the funds as efficiently as possible, getting the most bang for our buck. And that's the main reason too, I would want to move GB up, not because I think they're more deserving in some way, but it's just like, oh, can we save some money by putting them in some portables that, you know, we've already paid for or whatever.
For the purpose of demonstrating to the public that the money is being used well and effectively, and maybe also as a benefit to the students, would, you know, maybe it's worth, or I'll put a plug for possibly moving the junior highs up in that queue. You know, both because I think each of those serves a wider swath of the community overall, and B, because the academic needs of the students are probably more sophisticated in those schools, and so may be more in need of modernization. And, you know, may therefore, you know, be a more outside benefit than the other schools.
Could we have the schools use this budgeting as a deeper learning exercise?
Well, I will also comment on the middle schools. I actually would prefer to see our elementary schools go first because we're already committing a lot of funds to making the middle school model happen. And the elementary schools are like, you know, the entry point. And we had talked about TKK being a priority earlier, and our kids also spend more years in elementary school. So yeah, I actually would prefer to see the elementary school get the modernization first.
Actually, I'm sorry, I had related questions, which was, I noticed that on the draft schedule that Eric had put together, that was back when we thought that there was gonna be more construction required at the middle schools. So I think if you look at that detail, it has us spending like 15 or 17 million dollars at Block and Egan because we thought we were gonna have to build new locker rooms and stuff like that. And if that's not having to be done, because this budget only has a couple $1 million, I was actually wondering if, and this is obviously a cash flow question, but then my question is, can we move some of the elementary school work up into like the summer of 28?
We won't be able to do anything this summer 28. We won't have,
Just-
we
We
won't
won't have enough cash.
Yeah.
Okay. That was my question, given that we were spending less, because
Yeah.
I think originally we were gonna be doing the middle school work was gonna be done in 28. So there's some less
I
money.
think that was part of the comment, like, is there a way to increase the number for 2029
right.
beyond two
So,
schools? Is it?
I'm sure all of us are on the same page, as like,
Yeah.
we wanna spend the money as fast as we have it.
Right.
And efficient.
Yeah, the sooner we schedule and prioritize projects, the less escalation we're gonna pay.
Right.
There's gonna be natural escalation, but you know, to stretch your bond dollars farther, you wanna have as much compressed schedule as you can. But then there's also limitations on, of getting the bond issuances. We can't issue all the bonds at once. If we issue too
Right,
much
right.
early, then you have to wait till our assessed value grows to be able to stay under that $30 per 100 of AV. So if you're mindful of that, also there's a constraint on timing of bond issuances to be under the Prop 39 levels.
Did you say it was before June that we're gonna come back and vote on the order of projects?
At least for phase two, I
For
think
phase
is
two.
important. So can I summarize what I think I've heard? And you've been making notes too. So I think one of the things we want to look at is understanding the cost difference between the facility master plan modernization versus the cost presented here, because they're considerably more expensive. Perhaps instead of looking at just doing full school modernization, are there some different priorities that we would push up that would touch more schools? TKK, are there some big building needs at Egan? Oh, and the Gardner construction, and kind of come back with some details around those areas. What would a phase two look like? That's not just two elementary school modernizations. Is that a decent summary?
Well, I think, and then I was asking if we can look at some of the like Santa Rita and Oak are the two
Yeah,
that really
yeah,
stand out to me
yeah.
as the ones where those communities. Didn't have the modernization on their high priority list, and so. Is there a different mix that makes sense for?
Sure.
Basically, Santa Rita, Oak and Gardner Bullis
Yeah.
are the ones where it's like, does a different, slightly different mix make sense?
And, please.
Well, I don't think that you were proposing this, but I just kind of want to clarify that it's unlikely that there would be one summer in which like all 9 sites are getting work done simultaneously, right? Like even if we were to sort of like pick and choose maybe certain upgrades at specific sites, it doesn't mean that like, oh, and then all at once is everybody is getting whatever.
I mean, I think it
cited
depends
for-
on what it
refunds.
is. If we're talking about piecemealing HVAC and taking it out of a modernization, it is possible that multiple sites are getting HVAC work done.
And then we're not concerned about that triggering like a DSA inspector at each one of the sites.
I think that's,
We have to be Title 24 compliant, so when we start doing HVAC, some of our HVAC systems are not designed well. So we could replace the unit in kind, that might not be the best unit and the most updated technology. Some of the units are 20 years old plus, and that's old technology. They've got these some of the like, for example, at Covington, they've got these closets with heat pumps in them. They're called Airedales. They're very old. All of the ductwork should be replaced also, and so there's a lot of considerations that we have to look into. It's not like for like sometimes.
Okay. Well, anyway, I guess what I'm really trying to say is I'm risk averse when it comes to inspection. And so I really want to avoid a situation where we think we're gonna be in and out, but instead, like now we're stuck. Yeah.
yeah. So I'm adding to my list of, maybe this goes to a couple of the comments, but like understanding the true needs and working with our team and like what is broken and needs to be at the top of the list.
That would be great. And what would be our next step after this now? Now we've had this study session. Do we have in a few weeks or a month, another study session? Or do we do
Probably.
this? No.
Yeah, and then by June, we want at least that phase 2, whatever that might look like.
Any final thoughts? Yeah, any final thoughts from you?
No final thoughts for me. Thanks, Eric. You put a lot of time and energy into this.
Thank you very much.
Thank you for your.
It's an incredible lot of work. All right, we're gonna close this agenda item, move on. Is there any public comment on our closed session agenda? That is closed. In that case, I would like to adjourn us to closed session. Thanks, everyone.